of this committee of the whole meeting without reverb effect from my computer of the Village of Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Cole?
Here.
Trustee Fisher?
Here.
Trustee Freed?
Here.
Trustee Hatch?
Here.
Trustee Rappin's absent, and Trustee Ryder?
Here.
President Sherlock?
Thank you. Next is our non-agenda items and visitors for public comments. The Committee of the Whole allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the Committee of the Whole is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. I do not believe anybody here is willing to make a comment. Do we have anybody online willing to do so?
No, sir.
And I say we move on. Item number 4, the Committee of the Whole will entertain requests from anyone present to modify the order of business to be conducted. Moving forward to the consideration of the minutes from the January 13, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Are there any changes, any comments?
Voice vote?
It is a voice vote. Clerk, please call the roll.
Just all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the item for tonight that would be a restrictive covenants for 300 McLaren Lane. Drew?
So in your packet is a memo with several attachments outlining a request, and all this stemmed from a request for zoning relief. I'm going to bring up an image that may help facilitate the conversation. But a request to do an addition on an existing home, and the amount of impervious surface associated with this project exceeded restrictive covenants placed on the land that when the village sold previous owners many years ago, the property. And in fact, this wasn't the first time those restrictive covenants had been revisited. They were in the early 90s, 1994 to be more specific, by previous owners, and the village granted that project the ability by modifying its covenants then, and now the owner, while was at the zoning, the Joint Plan Commission Zone Board of Appeals earlier this month, made their request. The PCZBA said, what you're asking for doesn't seem to be such a big request. We would recommend you go to the village board and ask for relief from those restrictive covenants to achieve your progress. Achieve your project as originally drawn, because they did have a plan B, if you will, that if you guys turned them down, that they would proceed by modifying the size of the deck on the project and the amount of pervious surface. So, so staff went back in the record and tried to find more information on this. What was the basis for the standards? Why did they draw up the numbers as they were? We did not find anything to help us in that regard. And we talked about, maybe in a different world going back in time, that the village would have created some sort of buffer yard. That's more common, like in the village's own planned residential developments, when you want to create a certain buffer between certain different uses or different intensities of use, or the village was really trying to protect, how many structures or type of development that occurred on a lot between the Skokie Preserve and the adjacent residential area. They could have said, hey, nothing within the first 25 feet or something like that. But basically, the only restriction was they didn't want to have a separate structure on the house, or such as a house on that property. And they also, so this is an addition on the existing home, which is different, and within the covenants, but now it's just that trip up of that restriction on the amount of impervious surface that's holding them back from building the project they want to. That's it in a nutshell. I have a presentation that the project manager who's here would walk you through, if that's all right. Give me a second, I will bring that up.
Some interesting little covenants.
Want to go up? Yeah.
Good afternoon, I guess. Hi, my name is John McClendon. I represent the owners at 300 McLaren. So there's the property as it exists today. And if you go to the next one, so that is the location next to the open lands. And next is, a little zoomed in here in terms of where the property is. The Hawthorne never went through. It was intended someday to go through, never did, to the west. And next. So there's two lots. The restrictive covenants are on the lot 37, which is on the left-hand side. The restriction is 12% impervious coverage. And if you go to the next one. There you go. Thank you. So the image there shows the addition, the two-story addition on the right-hand side, and then the existing house on the left and in the center there. And really what we're asking for relief on is basically that dotted area. There's an existing beautiful tree that they want to keep. The deck area is about a little over 400 feet that we're asking for the relief on. So it goes from, and if you go to the next one, please. So currently, the building and the deck area is at 1,344 square feet. That makes up 12%. And if you went to without the new 400 feet of deck, and then in this case, it just shows that with that deck extension, it would be 16%. So, the net is asking for an additional 4% or about 400 square feet within the lot 37. Now, the rear setback, there's no issues on the rear setback there to the left. So that's the request this evening.
And just to point out, that if you're curious, the relief that they actually had to get is that this area here, by zoning code, even though there's no frontage and it's not necessarily the front door of the house, that's the front yard for that property because it's the shortest distance.
Oh.
So by the zoning code definitions, that had to get that relief for just that little bit, which was in the authority of the PCZBA. A minor,
And that's the case even though the address is on McLaren.
doesn't matter, right?
Doesn't
Yes.
matter. It's the size of the,
The length
Length
of
of
the
the
side of
s-
the property.
Do they own lot 38 as well?
Yes.
Do.
So it's both there.
Yeah, the house to the.
It's the same,
that's
right,
the
okay,
main-
that's what I
Yes, yep.
So Drew, you did research on the fact of the covenants and that they were changed in 1994, I
Yeah.
believe. So could you get behind the numbers at all, the 12% number, why those restrictions were?
We
Worded
could
the way
not
we're-
find the linkages for that to find out where they were pulled from and were they attached to any other property or why that, we couldn't find any connection with that.
The other question I have is whether Open Lands has done so much work on that property right behind it. I think they're continuing to do work there. Is this any reason why they're concerned about 12? I appreciate that 12% isn't much, but, or 16% is not much, but I'm just curious about them as the stewards of that property behind there, whether they have any concern. Not for this property in particular, but for, as we always are concerned, the domino effect of the next property that maybe wants to build farther back, for example. So I'm just concerned about them as the stewards of the open lands, and they've done so much work that I'd just like to be sure that they've understand any decision we might make to alter what happened in 1994 or what was imposed in 1994.
Is that the Buckthorn area? Were they, okay.
Yeah, that is the area that used to be called, I'll call it the,
The wall.
yeah, it was the wall, and it was a 100-foot buffer of buckthorn. And that was supposed to remain, and then all of a sudden, people didn't want it there at all. And
right.
And so, we have not talked to Lobola. I mean, the village is the property owner here. We have not talked to them about that. I know Lobola has had conversations with these particular property owners and doing their work. And I think the owners would be interested in the village removing the buckthorn in the areas to the south where hawthorn would go through. They've done a lot of improvements on their property and planted a lot of plant material.
On the Hawthorne right-of-way? Is that what you're
No, on their
referencing?
own property. I mean, so they, and so, I can't imagine they would have concerns with this.
I wouldn't think so either.
Yeah, I think.
It's just they've invested so much time that they seem
Yeah.
kind of like a interested party, even though
I
technically
think,
they aren't.
I think what's happened over time is that these lots have become premier properties as they abut the Skokie Preserve, and that people are going to look to improve them and take advantage of those western views and sunsets, right? It's,
Yeah, that sunset from the second story is going to be awesome. Yeah, I can't imagine, but we're in committee of the whole, so we're not voting on anything here, is that right?
the idea is this is on for consideration at the formal meeting, which occurring at 7 PM.
I see.
So the
Okay.
idea was that because.
Oh, that's right, it's on both schedules.
Yes, so, which is rare, but the idea that is, given the PCZBA's recommendation to approve it and how the village had approved it, something similar in the past, and it's not a large increase.
No,
or
it's not.
restriction.
Like a 4%, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really not in its impervious surface rather than bulk. It's really, and I think I read that the tree is thriving where it is, and they're going to take care to keep the tree thriving.
I think in a perfect world, we would have given you some, say, here's a basis, standards to make a decision on, but the truth is, we don't have any, and again, if we were going back years ago when these were created, we probably, staff now would have said, this is a different way to handle it, in creating a buffer yard. It's a lot cleaner, slightly less. I mean, the village has such a similar standard in our PRD regulations, but, you know, the 12%, the 14%, it's hard to discern or give you some sort of standards to judge that with, unfortunately, and we
All right,
couldn't,
so
we couldn't
I-
come up with any.
I have a question though,
Yeah.
because you and I talked and
Yeah.
I'm grateful because I was asking similar questions.
Yes.
as Susan was about, 12 to 14% is or isn't.
16.
Or
we-
16,
yeah.
right, 12 to 16% is or isn't significant. It might be, and I know, so I'm just curious about flooding over there. I lived in the West Terrace, or the East Terrace, before I now live in the North Terrace, and we were getting flooded constantly from neighbors making small adjustments to fix their yard, and then the next yard over was impacted, and then the next, everyone was doing their own thing. So I'm just curious if that do we have any concern about the impact of, because we spend a lot of time talking about and encouraging people to maintain pervious space.
Yeah, all that falls westerly to the Skokie Preserve, and
And into the ditch.
yeah. So I don't think in that general vicinity, there's any concerns over that.
And if I could, the idea of pervious and impervious, the deck truly is impervious, as demonstrated by the tree that's there living.
Pervious.
I mean, it's
Pervious.
not, or I'm sorry, yeah, pervious, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes, so, you know,
So a question about that, is the deck, the current deck surrounds that tree now, or?
yes, it currently does.
I see, yeah.
And that's, the intention is to maintain that same sort of structure.
Correct.
And the other issue is that the village, when the village approved those restrictive covenants, it was done on other properties along that same corridor. And the truth is, the village has not had a request to do anything other than almost 30 years ago for the same property, and hasn't had another one. So the volume of requests for this are going to be very limited, and staff thought the best thing we could do perhaps is create a solid record of the considerations. What did you guys talk about, so that 30 years from now or so, when the next one may come along, that at least these are the things that were issued. You looked at, were the concerned about drainage, were the concerns about what was happening on the preserve next door, with, those types of issues, kind of creating some sort of standards in the absence of them.
Yes, I had a discussion with Drew about that today too, and so my main point was the 12%, where did it come from? So of course, Drew cannot find a basis to that pattern, literally. And so to Drew's point, the fact that the last request was in 1994 doesn't really make sense to continue a pattern or create a pattern that makes sense. Interestingly enough, I went and walked there with my dogs yesterday at the Skokie Preserve. It's an incredibly beautiful space.
It is.
Incredibly peaceful place. And my interest was to look westward,
Easterly.
eastward,
Yeah.
and how is this impacting on the peacefulness aspect of that space? And it was actually okay. That was my main point. That was, are we creating a thing that will basically intrude on, from a site standpoint, on the prairie at that location? And I actually was okay. So 12 to 16% was, I think it's going to be okay.
I'm not hearing any problems with, I appreciate our thoroughness, but it sounds like it's probably not that big of a problem. At least that's my opinion. I'd be okay.
Anything else on the board? Shayna, Kat?
No concerns from me.
Okay. Nope.
I think I'll just reiterate that I also am supportive of the like cleaning up the process of how we address these like one-off
Yeah.
Yes.
covenants, because obviously what I don't want to see is in 30 years, a new set of board members scratching their heads at something we really cared about and did like with really good intention to preserve or, to preserve Lake Bluff in one way or another. So however we can all work together to clean it up, make it clear, and unify it as much as possible, I'm on board for further discussions about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we would not be reversing the 1994, we're just allowing for this particular property, an exception, right? The 1994 restrictions will stay in place for everything except this property, or are we changing these
Yeah.
restrictions?
It's going to be technically the First Amendment
Right.
to the Declaration of Restrictive Covenants for this property at 300 McLaren.
For this property?
This property.
It would be good to get in touch with the initial lawyer that did the work for it.
30 years ago? Peter, that wasn't you, was it?
That was before us.
I think it was,
Peter Nordic.
I think it was Mr. Elrod,
In what year?
94.
Oh, that was us. That was right,
You were still in high school.
no, that was 94. That
It was right when you started.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same year, so.
Same year, yeah.
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 Do you
They
guys-
were like the Doogie Housers of water, so. I think, my understanding is that we're not making an exception, we're planning to amend, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's,
It's an amendment
For this property?
Yeah.
for this
Right.
property.
Correct.
right.
So is there I know that this is the first time since 1994 that we are looking at this type of property, and I think I counted about 6 of them maybe. So is there a value to establish a pattern or to work on a pattern? What do you think?
I think it's good to have this conversation, the minutes would reflect that here's the issues that they brought up and looked at and talked
Yes.
about. I think that should be a good place to start for the next 30 years from now.
I will also identify that 2 months ago, maybe not even that long ago, we had the full report from Ebola. And had they had, my recollection is they're very happy with the neighbors and the way that this is, it's a mutually appreciated relationship going on there. So had there been general concerns with neighbors building in this area, those kinds of things, I think with that very extensive review that we had from Ebola, we would have heard about that.
Yeah, their primary concern in this area is finding the right access point from the neighborhood.
Yes, which this is not the one that
This is
people
not
are
it.
using. Yeah.
This is not it.
Yeah. It's down,
Further north.
oh, it's further north.
Yep.
Okay. It's up there rather
Right
than.
here.
Yeah. So I would like us to continue to consider Albola's work on here. I think we would have heard about it. Were they concerned about these kinds of issues with the neighbors? I think we are in favor, personally, of moving forward. But I want those 94 restrictions to be in place elsewhere in case we should ever be able to figure out if there was some significant issue that still has relevance. I mean, these properties have changed so much since 1994 that it may be that that's kind of why I wanted to know what the 12% was about, because they've changed so radically with the eradication or near eradication of the buckthorn, that it may be that the 12% makes no sense at all for any of them. That was why I was trying to get to the root of what the rationale was. But we continue our discussion with, and are keeping in touch with Ebola, and continue to understand updates from how things are going in the neighborhood with their restoration efforts. And I think that is, and certainly your concerns that you raised, Taryn, about water, I think is another major issue, but this does not seem to present those kinds of issues.
Okay, so do we have a consensus to move forward with this plan 12 to 16, and we document this as part of a property, and we're good?
Yeah, the consensus seems to be move forward, and that'll be on the agenda later tonight.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I believe this is it for tonight's COW. And could I please have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you.